And I think it's helpful to give you a little bit of background here. He said in 1928, the Country Gentleman, for which magazine I was doing considerable writing about that time, sent me at my request on a pack trip across the Sierra Madre of Chihuahua and Sonora to write the story of the lost Tayopa mine. At the time, I thought it the most interesting story of adventure any human being could imagine. The Guggenheim Foundation gave me a grant of money for living in Mexico a year to gather materials. And during this year and during years that immediately followed, I made various trips on horseback or muleback with pack outfit and mozo, that's a person who's a combination guide and servant, wandering through the vast unpopulated mountains of Mexico, lingering at ranches and mining camps, living the freest times of my life. The written result was this book. He said, the name of the book has bothered me no end. It was originally set up under the title of The Hacienda of the Five Wounds, but the publisher was glad when I changed that to Tongues of the Monte, which appeared in 1935. Now I am glad that it is being republished, and he was referring to the new title, The Mexico I Like, but he did not offer any explanation as to why he changed that title. In any event, the setting is in Mexico and the Sierra Nevada mountains. I might mention that in 1983, my two sons, Rick and Rusty, who are here with us tonight with their families, and I retraced some of J. Frank's steps in those mountains. Great adventures for us, and it, needless to say, whetted my appetite for the book Tongues of the Monte. And this story from that book is about the mozo, that is the guide and servant, named Inocencio. The story is also about Inocencio's knife that was given the name the Faithful Lover. So here we go. J. Frank said, I was to come to know Inocencio better than I know most men, and to owe him my life. In certain ways, he justified his name, Inocencio. The younger vaqueros called him Don Inocencio. He never admitted to me that he could not read, and even if he could not, he knew more about his world than most college professors know about theirs. J. Frank could never pass a good dig at college professors, even though he was one. And then J. Frank said, Inocencio pulled from its long scabbard a knife and began whetting it on a stone taken from his morral. Now and then, when the knife was at a certain angle, the firelight made it gleam brilliantly. That looks like a particularly good knife you have, J. Frank remarked to Inocencio. Yes, senor, one of the other vaqueros spoke out, and one of the other vaqueros said, and it has a name and it has a history. What is its name? I addressed the question to the man who had given me an opportunity to ask it. The Faithful Lover, he answered with a laugh. Read what it says for itself. And that speaker chunked the fire into a blaze, and very modestly Inocencio allowed me to turn the blade so that the inscription upon it could be deciphered. And it was stamped in crudely but plainly on one side, Yo te amo, which means I love you. Now, Inocencio said, during times of revolution years ago now, Destiny took me above the mouth of the Rio Soto River at the Pacific Ocean. For a while we kept camp in a pueblo where the men fished and where there was a priest. The priest was a good man, but he always went by rules in books. He was an Italiano. One day, while some women were washing down at the edge of the water, a chamaco, a little boy, waded out to catch a horse of the devil with red wings, which was a dragonfly. The dragonfly went farther out into the ocean, and the boy followed. He was just playing, and all this his mother told. His mother heard a scream and saw a shark cutting him in two. She rushed to the rescue, but all she got was the legs and part of the trunk. Poor little one, poor little mother, poor little father. Pobrecitos, came voices of other vaqueros out of a silence as profound as the night. The father, Inocencio continued, was in his house just a little way off. It happened that I was talking to him at the moment when the cries of the women came to us. The father grabbed his knife. It was always at his hand. And when we got to the water and saw what was left of the boy, he ran for the priest. The priest came at once and looked at the pieces of the child. It is not possible, the priest said, for the church to perform rites over this. The head is gone, the heart is gone. The home of the soul is not here, and it is for the soul that the church acts. O Padre, the father of the boy said, I will pay all I have, my burro, my house, my skiff, and hooks. No, it is not possible, said the priest. Then this father turned to the mother. Show me exactly where the shark was, he commanded. She pointed and threw a rock to indicate. He did not say a word, pulled off his shirt. He wore no shoes. The pants were all he had on. Then with his knife, he cut a leg from the corpse and threw it into the water at the spot where the rock had fallen. He knew that the shark, hungry for more, was hunting and waiting. And as he cast the bait, he began walking toward it, his eyes searching, his knife in his hand. He was not disappointed. The shallow water compelled the shark to show part of his body as he grabbed the leg. The man with the knife was against him immediately. I could not say how long the two fought. I was without power to help, Inocencio said. Every person there was looking stone still. It was nakedness with a knife against teeth and lashing tail. The water showed streaks of blood, but in the end, the shark was dead. The man hauled him to the bank and slashed open his belly. There the head and the heart of his son showed themselves. They were white and partly gone, but they were plain. The priest had not said a word during all this time, not one little word. Now he said, the church will bury the child. Thanks be to God, the father said. So then, in continuing the story, J. Frank said to Inocencio, and so this is the knife, the faithful lover that killed the shark? J. Frank asked. Si, senor, said Inocencio. For a favor, the boy's father gave it to me. And so now we move to the last chapter of the book, and just a few words here about the closing relationship between J. Frank and Inocencio. J. Frank said, I felt regret that the morrow's night would find us at Sierra Mojada, whence a train runs to Chihuahua City. There, Inocencio, the good old man who had served me so well and I must part, he to go back, I to go on. And there we did part. but not without ceremonies and without counsels. And Innocentio said, "And now, my master and my friend, because you have been frank with me, you understand, and after God, you are next with me." And that last morning, Innocentio, with a little embarrassment tinging his pleasure, laid the scabbard containing the faithful lover, that is, the knife, upon my bed. I was to keep it as a recuerdo, a memento, of one who wished always to serve me. Then Innocentio unsheathed the knife, which was polished, bright, and newly sharpened, and with it cut a small vein in his left wrist. He wiped the knife clean, put it back in its scabbard, placed the scabbard in my left hand, and then with a finger took his own blood and marked a cross in the palm of my free hand. "This sign is more than words," Innocentio said. "Soy yo el suyo, I am yours." Then he gave me the abrazo. And then in closing, this is the last paragraph of the book. J. Frank said, "I stood on the rear platform of the lurching car until a curve cut off view of the station. As long as I looked, I saw the little old man who could be stately and who had muscles that never tired, an enormous straw hat on the ground beside him, making the gesture of the open heart towards me, and then extending his arms and holding them outstretched wide apart." So thus ends the story and the book, but with a footnote. We tend to believe that folklore may be fiction, so is this story true? Well, after my father died, and we were going through his things, we found this knife and scabbard, and with it, my father's handwritten note, which is very brief. This knife has engraved on the right side, "Yo te amo," which means "I love you." And this, with its scabbard, was presented to me by J. Frank Dobie shortly after he returned from Mexico following his travels there on horseback in search of materials for his book, Tongues of the Monte. In that book, Frank relates how his mozo Innocentio gave him this knife, which he refers to as the faithful lover. And interestingly, after almost 100 years of rust, if you look carefully on the right side of the knife, it does say, "Yo te amo." Thank you.
That is, I got chills when you pull that knife out. I didn't know where we were going there. That's amazing. Good for you, and thank you for this. Having the personal touch. I believe it's the first time we've heard it read here at Dobie Dichos. You know, if we didn't have Mr. Dobie saving these stories and preserving them for us, it would be such a loss for Texas literature, for all literature. Did you knew Mr. Dobie?
Yes.
Do you have some personal commentary you want to throw in, or you can make up something if it makes a better story? Dobie would do it.
Well, I have a very short anecdote. In 1988, my wife Seiza and I were fortunate to be able to bring J. Frank and Bertha's home in Austin back into the family, and we, over a period of 2 years, rehabilitated it. And incidentally, today it is the Mishner Center for Writers on the edge of the UT campus. And we had a dinner party there one night for Liz Carpenter, who was the Johnson family press agent, etc. And Mrs. Carpenter related this story, and I'll be quick about it. She said that she was in the Austin Garden Club with Bertha, and at a luncheon one day, Bertha related the time when J. Frank, and as he would tend to do in the afternoons, wander out into Bertha's rose gardens and smell the roses to recharge his riding batteries. And one particular afternoon, a lady wandered by. They didn't know each other. J. Frank was in his rumpled khakis, and as Steve Harrigan said earlier, characterizing the way he dressed, he did tend to wear rumpled clothes. So the lady passing by assumed he was the gardener because he was down among the roses. And she said, "Oh, would you come to work for me?" And J. Frank knew he had one on the hook. So he said, "Well, no, ma'am." He said, "I get to room here, I get all of my meals here, and I get to sleep with the lady of the house." So, with that, the lady wandered away. But that was typical of his humor.
That's
he was
great.
Great at that.
That's great. Dudley, thank you so much. This has been a real treat. Appreciate it. Thank you.